Hello and welcome to another edition of the GEB America podcast. I'm your host today, and I have a friend and a local pastor, author, speaker with us today, Pastor Paul Daugherty from right across the street from us here. He is so glad to join us today. Pastor Paul, welcome to the program.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the speakers and not necessarily those of GEB America, Oral Roberts University, or their employees. This program is not intended to offer investment, financial, medical, legal, or any other advice. Viewers should consult a subject matter professional regarding any such matters.
Hey, glad to be on it with you. Honored to be a part of it.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to this. This has been, we've been talking about for a while. I'm so glad it got to happen. I know you were busy recently with a really exciting and quite historic, I think, time with the Victory Conference. How was everything? How did everything go with that?
Man, it was powerful. We kicked it off Wednesday night. We actually had a crazy moment happen on Wednesday, the day that our conference began. I got a phone call from our guest speaker that night, Darius Daniels, and he called me and was like, "Hey, Paul, it's snowing in Atlanta like crazy." He's like, "We almost got a foot of snow, and our pilots won't take off right now." And as I'm saying this, I think about some of the plane crashes that have happened in the last week or so.
True.
And I think, man, I think it was the grace of God, wisdom of God for probably him to call in and say, there's no way I'm going to press my pilot. Because he had a private plane that he had access to, but they just didn't feel peace about trying to fly through the winter storm that was hitting that area, in a very unprecedented way. Like they haven't gotten that much snow in a long time, I think. But
agreed.
But we only had 4 hours till the conference was beginning. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's 3 p.m. Conference kicks off at 7 p.m. He's our opening speaker.
Yeah.
So I'm like in the middle of getting a haircut, thinking everything's fine. I'm like, okay, we got to figure this out. But the peace of God honestly just settled on my heart. And I was like, Lord, who should I call? And I had Craig Groeschel's number in my phone. He's been a friend to me, really a voice of mentorship and encouragement over the last several years. So I called him just thinking, there's no way he's going to say yes, but I'm going to shoot for the stars. And I said, Pastor Craig, he was like, you caught me right at the perfect timing. I'm recording a podcast and I'm literally about to record another interview on my new book that comes out next month. What can I do for you, Paul? And I said, can you come and preach tonight in 3 hours in Tulsa, Oklahoma? And he's like, well, I live in Oklahoma City, so it's about an hour and a half drive. He said, Let me talk to Amy. He said, good news is I don't have anything tonight except a date night. So he's like, let me see if she wants to make the date night to Tulsa, Oklahoma at Victory, and we'll go eat somewhere in Tulsa. I was like, yes, we will pay for whatever meal you want to get. So she said yes, and next thing we knew, he preached a phenomenal message. The next morning, I preached at the conference. Then we had Christine Kane, John Bevere, Bill Johnson. We had actually, one of my favorite parts about the conference was not the speakers, although they were amazing, but we actually had a record number of salvations at our conference. Wow. When you do a church conference, you're not really expecting unsaved people to come and get saved. You're normally expecting at a church conference, church people to come, get equipped, respond to the altar call in a sense of like, I'm letting this message, resonate with me. I'm going to live it out. But we had a lot of unsaved people that came to the conference. We had 1,900 people give their hearts to Christ.
Praise God.
1,900 people in a matter of 5 days. So I thought that was a really cool testimony. Yeah. We had 250 confirmed healings, people that got healed.
Yes.
And then we just had several encounters with the Holy Spirit where the people just felt a powerful presence of God equipping them for the year. So it was amazing. And then the week before the conference was my 1 year anniversary of my new book, Mind Games.
Come on.
So I preached a little bit out of just the book and the last year, walking through what does it look like to write a book, to release something that's in your heart, and a book that's all about winning in the mind and battling the thoughts that come against us that aren't from God. How do we walk in victory in our mind so we can walk in victory in our life? But yeah, it was a big month. January was a big month. I don't know when this is airing, but we're recording in February. But yeah, God did some amazing things at the start of our 2025.
Yeah, this should be hitting here in the next couple of weeks, in mid-February. definitely very still timely for sure. Yeah, I got to say, I think that I actually saw your social media post saying, by the way, update, we've got Pastor Craig Rochelle joining us. Like you were just getting the word out there like it had just happened. And so I was like, that's cool. I think I was letting somebody know. They were like, yeah, I'm going tonight. I'm like, by the way, it's going to be a different speaker. Like, really? So they were like, okay, cool. Pastor Greg will be great. So well, I love that. I love that place of, as you mentioned, just the mentorship and leadership to be able to say, hey, could you do this? And, being someone who understands serving, understands that dynamic of being in a tough spot. I know that was probably a great opportunity, both ways for both you and Pastor Craig to get to do that and kick it off. But also, my goodness, the numbers of salvation, what an amazing opportunity that is. That's to see Jesus showing up. And I think that's also a reflection of, where we are right now and the timing. I think there's a hunger.
Yeah.
What an amazing opportunity that would be for, to have Pastor Craig come down, get to come up the highway and get to help and be a blessing. Just from that place of, like I said, mentorship. I just think that's such a thing. And what's in my mind, as you said that, is that you've seen that modeled and you've put God's put a place in your life over you, many people that are leaders who are able to speak into your heart, speak into your life as a leader, as a pastor. Talk about that a little bit, kind of in terms of what that has meant for you to be in that place.
Yeah. I mean, I much prefer to be mentored than to be the mentor. I don't know. I'm a very teachable person. My grand who just turns 101 this month, she's getting ready to move to Texarkana, Arkansas, and it's very emotional for me.
Yeah.
And she was telling me, I'm coming back to answer your question through this.
You're fine.
But she was telling me, she said, Paul, I have loved having you as my pastor, my grandson as my pastor these last few years. And she said, even though I'm moving down to Texarkana, 6 hours away, she said, you're still my pastor. I said, Grand, you're my pastor. She was like, no, don't you put that on me. She goes, you're my pastor. And she goes, you're also my boss, because she works for me full time. And I said, I'll pay you till the day you go to be with Jesus, because the Lord told me to always take care of my mom and Grand.
I love that.
And to, the Bible instructs us, take care of widows and orphans. Well, she's a widow. My mom's a widow. And
that's right.
We take care of them. But in that, Grand said, I know you enjoy being under somebody. Like I do. I enjoy being influenced, mentored by Craig Rochelle, John Bevere, Larry Stockstill. My dad was my greatest mentor for all the years that he was alive. There's been different mentors throughout my life that I've loved sitting under them and receiving all of their wisdom and advice and counsel. And if I was you, I would do it like this. If I could give you my 2 cents on this, I love that. I eat that up. I'm like, yes, tell me more.
Yeah.
When someone comes to me on that, I'm like, oh, okay, I've got to be the mentor now. So anyways, my grand, I do not mentor my grand. She definitely mentors me. She is definitely the elder, but she definitely has taught me a teachable spirit.
Yeah.
That no matter how old we get, no matter how much leadership titles and accolades and trophies we get, to always remain teachable, humble enough to receive wisdom, instruction, mentorship, because I think that's the key to, in my opinion, I think that might be the key to longevity. Looking at Grand, 101 years old, still serving the Lord. She's teachable. And not just, someone could say I'm teachable, but they don't seek any mentor out. I'm like, you're only teachable if you actually apply a teachable spirit to ask someone for advice, wisdom. And then once you ask for it, to follow through with it and say, hey, they gave me this advice, I'm going to do it. That's where mentorship really can help us in our life, is we seek out people who have more wisdom than us, more knowledge than us, more experience than us, and then we apply the wisdom they give us.
Amen. Good word. On a little quick side note with that, I was actually, I don't know if I say surprised, but I didn't realize there was connections to Texarkana, because my grandparents from my dad's side lived in Winsboro, Texas, which is about an hour or so due southwest of Texarkana there. And so my dad actually did some work there in Texarkana, some design work, because he was an architect, and did some design work in Texarkana. And so we would travel down. My mom and I would go stay with the grandparents, hang out, have fun, and he would go over do some work, and meet with people, and then come over and obviously his parents, and spend time with them and do stuff. So we had many trips down the road to that area, Texarkana and Winsburg, it's not a crazy long trip. It's, I think, about 5 hours, 4.5, 5 hours. And some of those Texas roads, those speed limits are a little higher. So they can fly by pretty good down that area. Anyway, so let's, on that, kind of segues into, you just mentioned your book, and congrats on a year anniversary of that coming out. I think there's a chapter in there where you talk about your friend, Pastor Michael Todd, who's a local pastor here in the Tulsa area. And from that perspective, maybe kind of on a camaraderie mentorship, what does that look like? Because I know you guys have been friends for a long time. And what does that look like for you guys as you've both grown in pastoral roles and opportunities, and God's just kind of brought more people to the church and just different opportunities to have that camaraderie and to have that to bounce things off each other? What's that look like for you guys?
Well, Mike is a dear friend. I would call him a lifelong, very close friend, if not a best friend.
I love that.
Yeah, we met when we were in college. I was in college. He, I think, had decided to maybe take a year off from college that year. And he was actually a music producer. I had a band, and I was making music back in my college days at ORU.
Yes.
And I was 20 years old, and the producer that had just recorded my last few songs said, "Hey, I'm moving to New York. I can't keep producing your music." This was back in a time where you had to fly to a city to really make music. And all technology wasn't advanced. So he said, unless you want to fly up to New York, which is pretty expensive, I suggest you find someone in Tulsa. And I remember hearing through a bass player that played with us, this guy who played bass for our band, but he also played bass for a gospel youth urban church service in Tulsa. He said, "Let me introduce you to my man, Mike Todd, whose parents are Brenda," and I forget his dad's name, but he starts telling me about the Todd family. I go, "I feel like I've heard this family." And he was like, "Yeah, they've been serving in Tulsa. They were serving under Carlton Pearson. Then they've been a part of Gary McIntosh's church."
Okay.
And so, long story short, I go over to Mike's mom's house where Mike lived, and he had a music studio at his mom's house in his bedroom, backed up to his bunk bed where he shared a room with his brother. And it was just like a computer, a microphone, and a plug-in for your guitar, your piano. And he goes, "This is where the magic happens." And I go, "So wait a minute, you sleep right here, your brother sleeps right there, you do your homework over here, and then you record bands." He's like, "Yeah." And we built the best, funniest friendship in that season. Neither of us were pastors. Neither of us were married, had kids, had really, gone on to do what we're doing today.
Right.
And he produced our band's album. He made it so smooth. He added some gospel vibes to it. He was making music himself. And so he added some of his own musical taste into it. And people were like, "Who made this for you?" I was like, "My friend Mike Todd." Fast forward 3 years after that, I became our church's young adult pastor. And back then it was called 3D, College Ministry for Victory. And then he became the college pastor at Gary McIntosh's church, which was Wood, and they called their young adult ministry SoFly. So both of us were pastoring the college ministries underneath. Back then my dad was still alive. His pastor was Gary. And both our young adult ministries started growing. 3D, our young adult service went from 150 young adults to 500, 600, 700, 800.
Yeah.
His SoFly young adult service went from 50 young adults to 1,000 young adults.
Wow.
And so both of us in the city were reaching young adults.
Yeah.
And it was cool that we could do it together, cheer each other on. Then we both stepped into the role. My father passed away. My mom stepped in as an interim pastor, and then I eventually stepped in as the senior pastor. And he stepped in the same year as me of Pastor Greenwood. And so when we both stepped in, we both were like, "Bro, we got to stick together. We got to help each other." At this point, we had both been married to our wives, for 5 years. I think they had just had their first child, Bella. We had just had our first child, Liam. So we were very much in the same season of raising a child, pastoring a church, feeling very young to do this. But his church at that time was about 200 people, 300 people with 2 or 3 staff members. So he would come over to Victory often. He would say, "Man, talk to me. How can we get stronger? What can we do?" And he would come to conferences we were doing. And I remember him asking me, he's like, "Would you pray for me that my church would just grow and that God would use my voice?" I was like, "Yes, of course." And at that same time, he was asking different ministers like Tim Ross or Bishop Jakes, different ones that would pray for him and speak life into him.
Yeah.
Greg Rochelle, who came to our church, prayed for him. But all of a sudden in 2017, something shifted. His church blew up and his voice became well known around the world. And he went from having like 2,000 followers on Instagram to like 1 million, overnight.
Yeah.
And I remember like thinking, what did I pray? Did I pray this or did someone else? I was like, what's going on over here? And I remember calling him, and I talk about it in my book, Mind Games, where I talk about the mind games of comparison and jealousy and envy and not being able to celebrate other people's success, because I was dealing with that when Mike's church blew up and a lot of our young adults started going there, and our friendship was tested. During that year, he would come up to me and be like, hey bro, did you catch my sermon at Elevation Church for Stephen Furtick? I was like, yeah, very cool, very cool. And I'd be like, just salty, not being very kind. And he was like, oh, you're jealous. And I'd be like, no, I'm not jealous, But I talk about in the book, what helped me overcome that was I called my pastor, a mentor of my life, Larry Stockstill, and I called him and I said, Pastor Larry, I've really been struggling with comparison, envy, just feeling unworthy. I said, I don't even know that it's jealousy as much as I just feel so less of a pastor and less valuable because this young guy is just, everybody loves him. And he goes, who are you talking about? I go, Mike Todd. He goes, oh, Mike Todd's the greatest. He's the best. And I'm like, stop it. That's why I'm calling you. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I'd be jealous of him too. He's way better than all of us. And I go, Pastor, you're not helping me. He goes, no, Paul. He goes, you need to accept that God's hand is on Mike and you need to celebrate that. And he said, God's hand is on you too, but you have a different calling. You have a different assignment. And it doesn't mean you're lesser than or less valuable or not as good of a preacher or pastor. He's like, Mike's phenomenal. But he said, you're special too, Paul. And I was like, yeah, I just battle this comparison. We're in the same city. A lot of our young adults have stopped coming to our church, went to his church. And he was like, Paul, just stick with it. God's hand is on you. God's hand is on Mike. He said, I would suggest that you repent to God. And he said, if you feel in your heart to repent to Mike, if you've acted in any way around him jealous, you need to own that.
Yeah.
And I called Mike up and I write about it in my book in this chapter about, I reflect on the story and the kind of a similar story in the movie Toy Story, how Woody was like the toy that everybody liked until Buzz Lightyear showed up. And then Buzz Lightyear kind of stole the spotlight. Woody started feeling like less valuable, gets jealous, And in the end, Woody and Buzz become best friends. They end up, helping each other escape from Sid's house, So I tell the story.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah. And so I said, Mike, you are the Buzz Lightyear in my story. And I take him to breakfast. What's really funny is we met at Metro Diner, a breakfast spot here in Tulsa. And when we got in, everybody was like, that's Mike Todd, And they walked up to me thinking I was his armor bearer, his security guard, which I'm not very strong, but they came over to me, gave me their phones. They're like, will you take a picture of me and Mike? And I was like, yes. So I'm taking pictures of Mike and all the people at Metro Diner. And then we sit down. He goes, what's on your heart, Paul? And I go, man, I just need to apologize. I've been jealous. I've been envious. I've been in a comparison trap with you. I've had all these mind games that I've just had to overcome of feeling less valuable because of how awesome you are. And he starts laughing. He's like, I noticed, bro. I saw it. And I was like, stop it. And he was like, yeah. He goes, but you know what? He's like, I even struggle with jealousy towards you when I was first pastoring and your church was much bigger than ours. And all these great speakers were coming to your church and all the young adults in Tulsa were flocking to Victory. And he said, all of us walk through these seasons of comparison and feeling lesser than, or pride, feeling better than, superiority. And we both just admitted to each other at the table, like being a pastor in this day and age, there is just so much social media comparisons, so many reasons for pastors to feel lesser than, better than, inferior, superior, pride, jealousy, all of it, all the mind games. And man, we just start crying. Like I cry and I go, bro, I love you. I want to be your friend. I want to be like in your corner when anyone is picking on Mike Todd, which back then nobody was picking on him. In fact, everybody was like praising him, but the same people that praised him would be the people that would throw stones at him a few years later.
Interesting.
And I said, I want to be your friend when there's fans and when there's not fans. And he said, same with you. And so we've been each other's like good buddies. And it's really funny because he helped me whenever my book came out a year ago. He helped me do like a whole book launch and got the book out there. And I told him, I go, there's a whole chapter in here about you and our friendship. And it's just funny because both of our kids go to school together at Victory. All of his kids are in the school here. And he actually showed up the week of conference with a suitcase full of clothes that were his clothes and shoes, because we have the same shoe.
I saw that.
And he was like, bro, I want to hook you up with new wardrobe. I was like, why? And he goes, because you always wear the same outfit every single time I see you. I need to get you some new outfits. And I'm like, I'm a cheap clothes buyer. I buy clothes from Walmart, thrift store, Old Navy, on sale. Like,
Yep.
But he gets like the nice stuff. So he's like, let me hook you up with some nice shoes. Nice. So it was hilarious. My wife walked in. She was like, what are you wearing? You don't look like yourself. I was like, I know. I'm wearing Mike Todd's clothes. But anyways, yeah, it's a good friendship. Yeah,
That's
I don't know if
great.
I answered your question.
You did. No, that's excellent. I think that's a good, and it's good perspective as well, just of what that looks like to walk through from the different phases, from the growth early stage all the way up through, now where you guys both have good, thriving, healthy churches that are both doing well and making an impact for the kingdom here in Tulsa, the city of Tulsa. I know and I guess I'd be curious to hear from him at some point, the dynamics of when he made the transition from more north central Tulsa to south Tulsa. I know that was a big deal for them, but I know that having your friendship alongside him in that, I'm sure was a huge help to help encourage him and just make those decisions and just trust God in that.
Yeah, 100%. I think, when he moved over to South Tulsa, it was an opportunity really for our friendship to get stronger because he was closer. He was in North Tulsa, he was 20 miles away, but when he moved to South Tulsa, he's 10 minutes away.
Right.
And so he gave us a chance, honestly, to connect better and to encourage each other. I think he walked through some things in our city and even on social media where there's been criticism and, all kinds of things that have been said against him. And I've just said, Mike, regardless of what anyone says, you're my friend. I'm your friend. I love you. I'll stand and pray for you and be there for you, and vice versa. And I think that's the beauty of when you can get over your insecurities, you can be a lot better of a friend. We can be a lot better of a friend to the people that God's called us to be friends with. So
That's good. And I think, what I have come, I'm almost 45, and I think in my years, I'm getting to the point now where I'm seeing that the true friends are those who don't just say great job and celebrate, but they also can say, hey, something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
They can call you on something in love and speak that out. And I think that's something that we need, those people that number, when we're in high school and college, that number of people that are around, you feel like your friends are pretty big. You feel like there's a pretty good wide group. But as we get older, that number narrows,
It gets smaller.
and it gets smaller. That's okay. I think you're going deeper, longer, further with a closer group. And I think that, for you, that's obviously amazing and awesome to have him. And it's funny to hear you say there's the story. I've got a good friend of mine, my wife and I, who all of our kids are almost the same identical ages. And we've walked through we connected for college again. We were both, my wife and I were expecting our first. They were expecting their first. And I think our kids were born about 4 weeks apart. Right. And so we've had all four of our kids have had about roughly same year, birthday, maybe several months of in between, but it's been pretty special to have somebody that's kind of walking along that same season, as you mentioned, along with you. It just makes a huge difference. So, now talk a little bit about, real quick, I'm going to pivot back for a second because it jumped back at me in my recollection. So your grandma is 101, and I love, and I celebrate that because my grandmother on my dad's side lived to 101. So I can't wait to see how much further she surpasses that. For you guys. But what has that been like, having your mom and her still around, able to speak into the church as you have grown through and kind of, I think the story you told me years ago, we talked before about this, was something to do with, having your shoes, versus your dad's shoes and walking in who you are and who God's called you to be, but having the chance to have their voices to speak leadership and wisdom. How has that helped you grow to see through the last, 10 years or so?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's been invaluable. I think having them around has been incredible. I can't name any pastors off the top of my head that have their mom and their grandma working on staff with them. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know anyone. I don't know. I don't know if it exists out there. Maybe it does. And I just haven't met those pastors, but every pastor I know, that's not the case. And I think for me, it's a special thing because my mom and dad founded the church. They started it in 1981. I think the beautiful thing that God, has done in our family is just, it's like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's just this generational connection of like, if Abraham was alive while Jacob was older, and he could have Abraham in his ear talking to him about what it was like when God told him to lay Isaac on the altar.
Yeah.
And Isaac, I think having the generational voice of history has given me more confidence about our present and our future. I think listening to them saying, oh, we've been there, we've done this, we've seen it, and God's going to be faithful, has been very invaluable. I think at the same time, it's added energy to them because a lot of people, once they reach 65, 68, 70, they're not really working around 25-year-olds and 33-year-olds. That generational employment type of experience it's not very, I would say it's not prevalent out there. You don't see that a lot, where a 100-year-old woman is working next to a 30-year-old guy all the time. Would you agree with that or disagree?
No, I think so. I think you're right.
And so I think having both the generational youthfulness that we bring and the wisdom they bring I think it's been a blessing for both sides. I think my mom, she feels like she has a voice still of speaking into my life, speaking into our church. She sits on the board. She adds invaluable wisdom. My grandmother just stepped off the board last year, but she's been a part of that was just because she was like, I want you to add some board members that are under the age of 100. I said, yes, that's probably wise for us. But she's been so just wise in helping us, even just thinking through things like who we hire and how we hire them and the protocol, like a gatekeeper, just looking out for who's working on staff with us.
Yeah.
Do they fit the culture? Do they connect with the DNA? They've seen people that can be one way in front of you and then a different way. And so they have wisdom of discernment, being able to say, hey, you may not want this person on your core team. You may want to vet this person a little bit more. And so I lean into their wisdom and counsel all the time.
Good.
And then on top of that, they really lean into me in a way that I did not expect. Like, I always saw them as my elders.
Yeah.
They really lean into my sermons. They really lean into what is God speaking to Paul. And I think that's humbling for me, is like, man, I feel like God uses me to speak life and encouragement into them, where I was so used to God using them to speak life and encouragement into me. But there is a dual benefit there.
That is so special. Wow. That's cool to hear. I love that. One more kind of main question here that I was thinking about was the, how is your, as things have grown and as you've moved into this year, how is your kind of understanding and walk of grace and faith and like trusting God in that? How has that grown? Have you seen anything, major? Has there been any major mile markers that you would point back to? Or has it just been kind of a growing point throughout the time?
Well, you referenced my dad's shoes. So when I first started pastoring, I wore my dad's shoes, literally, trying to think that if I wore his shoes, maybe I would preach with better anointing. People would like me more. I would have more faith, whatever. And that didn't last long. I finally got out of those shoes after the first year and started wearing my own shoes. So I think the journey of becoming, I feel like we're always becoming a better version of ourselves if we are following Jesus. We should be. If we're not obeying Jesus, we're becoming a worse version of who we were when we started with him. And I think for me, thankfully, it feels like it's been this gradual growth and evolving into who God's called me to be. I think there's more grace that I have for people in general than I did 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I feel like I understand, as a pastor, I understand the pain of people better now because of walking through my own pain. I think the longer you stick around in anything, the more you have grace for people that have walked through anything. I think I talk with people that have been married for 50, 60 years, and they are the most graceful people. And I was talking with someone yesterday who's celebrating 25 years in their marriage, and they were laughing. I said, "What's your advice?" It was their 25-year anniversary, and they're like, "Man, just keep on showing mercy to each other because we all need it." We live in such a ruthless world. And I think as a pastor, I've realized, man, people need mercy and grace. The CEO of the BOK Center needs just as much mercy as the homeless man under the bridge. The guy that's been married for 1 year just needs as much mercy as the woman that's been married for 50 years. Everybody just needs more grace and mercy. And I think even as a boss we have 400 employees at Victory, our people are not perfect, just like me. I'm not perfect. And I think if we're expecting perfection, we're either going to live with a very rigid Pharisaical mindset where everybody falls short, including ourselves. And I think it's a very tormenting way to live like that. I think if we can walk with grace and truth, hold people accountable, but always look for the path of restoration, mercy, grace, give people a chance to keep growing, I think it makes for a much more fulfilling life. I think that as far as faith goes, the evolving of faith, what I was believing God for 10 years ago is different than what I'm believing God for now. What I've seen God do in the last 10 years as pastor, it's like it gives me confidence. We just built a $3.5 million athletic facility, and we did it without having to really raise a whole lot of funds. Like, we did get up in front of the church and cast the vision. The grace and the faith and the momentum for that building came more from the results of just walking in this path of obedience, faith, getting up every Sunday, doing what God's called me to do, and God supernaturally provides. There's less sense of like, we got to get this now, and if we don't get it now, we're all going to die. And, I don't know. I just feel like the growth of our church and the expansion of our ministry has come more recently in the last couple of years without so much striving, and with more just like a simple rhythm of obedience, faith, kindness, generosity, and somehow God provides. And he might provide through the widow's mite, a bunch of people just barely giving. He might provide with some multi-millionaire that says, "Hey, I want to write the check for the rest of whatever you guys are believing for over here." And so, I don't know, that journey of faith, just trusting in God, being faithful to what he's called us to do, and not feeling like we've got to be in a hurry to try to make everything happen real quick, but just being patient on that road, and God has supplied. And so, I don't know if I answered your question, but those are some of the things I've been learning.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit, a little different here. Kind of talking about the power of the words and shifting your mindset, kind of on the theme of your book. Would you mind leading our audience, and I'll kind of act as the echo? I know there's a confession that you share every time you get up with your congregation. Would you mind leading us with that? And I'll be the echo response for you, so that way it sounds like somebody's actually responding to you.
Yeah. Well, before I do, let me say this: you can't live a victorious life with a defeated mouth. And I always say to our church, if you're going to walk in victory, you got to talk in victory. That's good. Our words carry so much power. Life and death is in the tongue. My dad wrote a book called The Power of Your Words. I speak on it every day to my children. We got 5 kids, and I am always telling my sons, especially because they're the oldest ones, be careful with your words. Your words can either hurt someone or help someone. Yeah. And for yourself, you can either talk yourself into victory or talk yourself into defeat. So That being said, this is what I lead our church into, a confession. Every week we call it the Victory Confession.
Come on.
So repeat after me.
Yes.
I'm here on purpose.
I'm here on purpose.
Because I have a purpose.
Because I have a purpose.
My heart is open.
My heart is open.
My mind is ready to receive.
My mind's ready to receive.
Because God is not finished with me yet.
God's not finished with me yet.
My best days.
My best days.
Are right in front of me.
Are right in front of me.
I have victory in my life.
I have victory in my life.
Because Jesus lives in me.
Because Jesus lives in me.
Yes, sir.
Amen. Well, maybe you're listening or watching that, and you're not real sure what those words meant. If that's the case, reach out to us. Let us know. We'd love to pray with you, talk with you. But also just know that your words have power. And this is a good confession, something that I think I do coaching with a gym, and we do confession as well. And I know that having that confession, having those times with speaking life it matters. And so, Paul, thank you so much for that. That was a really, really good word. And then also, I'm gonna pivot just a little more to finish off on a super high kind of fun note just for a second. Last little thing we do is just kind of I call it like popcorn. So in other words, this is just random questions, just fun things, just kind of get us on a high note here. So, favorite restaurant in Tulsa area to go to?
Red Rock Canyon.
Okay, I love that one. That's a good one. If favorite comfort food, and maybe it's the same place, but favorite comfort food if you could have anything ever, what would it be?
Probably Hungry Howie's pepperoni pizza.
Hungry Howie's with the flavored crust. Come on. Watch out. Now, I know you have gotten to travel a lot of places. So it didn't have to be the tip-top favorite, but maybe it stands out to you as a favorite in your life that you've gotten to travel somewhere. So,
probably Hawaii.
Is that a personal favorite with you and the family, or is that?
That was our anniversary trip.
So good.
That was honeymoon trip, and then it was our anniversary trip as well.
Same with us. We did that also. Our honeymoon was Maui and Kauai, and then we've gone back to Maui several times since then, and we love it. Awesome. Yeah,
incredible.
Gorgeous. Let's see. A favorite, again, not have to be, not saying the name is above everybody else, but a favorite for you of an author that you follow and love to read their books of, besides yourself.
I'd say Andy Andrews.
Okay. What's the latest book for him if somebody's looking for
I don't know his latest book, but the books that impacted me the most from him was The Traveler's Gift. That was probably one of my favorites. And then he wrote a book called Butterfly Effect that I've really liked, and The Notice.
I remember that book. I remember hearing about that one. I forgot. Okay, I didn't remember his name, but I remember the book name. That's cool. Okay, and then the last one here is what is something you've seen that surprised you in your kids growing in the last year?
Man, that's an interesting one. What is something I've seen that has surprised me? I mean, I think that they're all hilarious. They've all seen the funniest stuff. I think the thing I've enjoyed the most.
There you go.
That they all get along with each other, and we're all best friends together. So we did this last summer, I think we bonded in a way we hadn't bonded before. We've done like trips together, but this last summer we did a road trip across the West Coast. Yeah. And we were stuck in that car for about 100 hours, and we saw a bear, we saw a moose. We had moments where one of the kids, it was crazy moments, cliff jumping, running and jumping in a random lake and waterfalls. And I think just seeing their joy and laughter, yes, they fight with each other, and we have to work through that and spank them and help them grow and time out and all that. But I think seeing their laughter and their camaraderie has been a real fun surprise.
I love that. Awesome. Well, very good. Well, this has been an amazing time with Pastor Paul Daugherty. Pastor Paul, thank you for this. Thank you for taking the time out and sharing. We'll put information in the bottom, but how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of your book, your social media handles, all that kind of stuff you want to leave?
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, X, at Paul Daugherty, Paul Daugherty. Same on all those. There's no spaces or anything, just at Paul Daugherty. They can also go to my website, pauldaugherty.org, or they can go to victory.com, and they'll find this book, Mind Games, right there. They can look it up on Amazon Prime or Audible, wherever you buy books. I got an audiobook version where I read Mind Games to you.
Nice.
And I'd love for you to get the book. Check out the podcast. I've got a podcast called Paulcast where I talk about mind games and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I was going to mention that too. Yeah, you have a podcast as well. And I thank you for taking time to do this. And if you've had a chance to see this, listen to whatever, if you've enjoyed it, it's been a blessing to you. Share it with somebody. Let somebody know what jumped out at you, what I think maybe I might encourage them, and subscribe. And we appreciate you tuning into the GB America podcast, and we'll see you or hear you next time